So is anyone here a twin? Raise your hand if you're a twin. No twins. One, there you go, one set. I don't know if you know, but I'm a twin. I'm an identical twin. And according to my mom, I'm the good twin and my brother's the evil twin. At least my interpretation of what she says. You know, I bring this up because it seems to go in our gospel, the author seems to go out of his way to identify Thomas Didymus as a twin. I don't know if you're aware or if you've ever heard, but Thomas the Apostle is a twin. And I often wonder why this detail was included. And John, when he includes details, it's for a reason. Maybe his twin was one of the well-known members of the early Christian community. Maybe that's why his being a twin is mentioned. But we don't know who the twin is, and so speculation abounds. But there's another reason that's more profound that I certainly subscribe to. The question, who is Thomas's twin, can be answered, I think, between the lines, and it's evident. The answer to that question is meant to be us. We are Thomas's twin. Because all of us are a mixture of belief and doubt, courage and fear, pessimism and optimism. Most of us are familiar with what happened in the upper room when Thomas showed up late. We may even have judged Thomas for his lack of faith. I mean, how could he not have believed, having lived and worked with Jesus for at least 3 years, seen the miracles, heard the preaching, and not believe what was being said? Maybe we even judge Thomas for, again, his lack of faith. And rightly and wrongly, doubters ever since have been dubbed doubting Thomases. Nonetheless, putting ourselves into this story, I think, can help us to understand our faith and also be honest about our faith. One way to do that is to ask ourselves some simple questions. What might you have done had you been in Thomas's sandals? Would you have reacted the same way? What would you have said? How might you have felt? Perhaps to our chagrin, we may have reacted as Thomas did. We might have even been more doubtful than he was. The reality is that certitude and doubt live within each and every one of us, especially when it comes to our faith. The reality is we live in a doubting world. For many people, empirical evidence, rational thinking have become a sort of God. Anything that science can't prove or the human mind can't reconcile, we assume to be either untrue or in the process of being proved by science. We kind of give science, when it comes to knowing and understanding and even truth, this sort of elevated status. If I can't see it, if it doesn't happen, if I can't measure it, if I don't experience it, then very likely it doesn't exist or is not true. For the moment at least, we believe only what we see and can measure, and often that's the temptation in our world. But our pride can also get in the way. It could blind us to the reality of our minds, no matter how brilliant we are, or how sophisticated science laboratories can be. We are limited in our ability to uncover truth. And it doesn't matter that the most intelligent among us have in the past misjudged what is true. It's interesting, we give science this special, unique, sort of up on the pedestal position, but we've also experienced how science hasn't been right in many situations in the past, especially. It doesn't matter that many of yesterday's scientific discoveries have been shown today by today's science to be incorrect. And I'm not saying that human intelligence and science should be rejected as paths of truth. The major reason why I love being Catholic is because our faith teaches us that God gave us a brain, and He wants us to use it. But what we often fail to do is make the distinction between what science is meant to find and prove and put on display and what faith is meant to do. You see, God gives us many vehicles to truth. And the gift of our human intelligence and the marvels of science are among them. But they're geared toward two very different things. While science can help understand what the how and the what is of things, science can't give us the answers to the why something is. That's where faith comes in. But even putting our doubts aside, how do we know that we have faith? Understanding that faith is something that's a part of who we are, and we're encouraged to really own. What do we do with it? Well, reflecting on this story, it offers us a chance to assess our own level of faith. You know, anyone can recite a creed, but does that mean that that person has faith? Any more than sending a Mother's Day card is itself necessarily translated into loving your mother. It's not the same. You know, we might attend Mass, which is great. And we may even, out of a force of habit, recite a blessing before we eat a meal. But does that qualify us as believers? Can at that point I say, then I believe? You know, atheists are said to be those who do not believe in God. But what does it mean to believe in God? Does it mean that we know our prayers and we can recite them not only in English, but maybe in Spanish or Italian? Does it mean that we have a religious medal hanging from our rearview mirror or a statue in our home? Does that make us religious, a believer? Does it mean that wearing a 14-karat gold cross around my neck means that I'm a believer? In his book, The Shattered Lantern, Ronald Rolheiser, he suggests that atheism is often found among religious people. It is what he refers to as practical atheism, or practical theism even. In other words, one may say that he or she believes, but is living as God does not exist, or at least that He doesn't matter, does that qualify you as a believer? For one who believes, but doesn't necessarily practice, or one maybe who doubts their belief, is that practical theism? So in this book, The Shattered Lantern, he does refer to this madman, this character who's created by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. So the madman in the story is carrying this lantern, and he goes into the center of town, and he announces that he's looking for God. The crowd laughs at him, whereupon he shatters this lantern on the ground, and he declares that God is dead, and that we were the ones who killed him. Consider how the second part of this assertion seems true. I mean, in many ways, we have killed God. And we act like He still exists. We have put God out of our society, never mind our home and our hearts. Think about it during this coronavirus pandemic, where churches were considered non-essential. I'm not going to get into politics. It's not a preacher's position to wade into those waters, nor do I have interest in doing that. But when liquor stores and dry cleaners were considered to be essential and not churches, how do we reconcile that? So we couldn't open the doors to the church to allow a person to pray before God, in the home of God, to enter into communication with the Creator, the one who's given us everything. We have all but eliminated God from government and from corporations. It's unfortunate reality of the culture in which we live. It's as if God is killed off when it doesn't seem practical to us. On a personal level, we're touched and we're influenced by society, whether we believe it or not. Would people who hear us in discussions about sensitive issues, the hot button issues, if you will, war, welfare, immigration, poverty, abortion, health care, social justice concerns, would they guess that we believe in God? How much of our behavior indicates that we worship and believe in God? Well, we come to church, or maybe we follow online. We see ourselves as religious, and we might as well be. But in what ways do our decisions about what we buy, how we vote, how we spend our resources, or how we care for each other, how does that show us to be practical believers? Another checkpoint about faith is, how do we respond to the difficulties and challenges that we're faced with in life? Perhaps the best that we can do when we're faced with the difficulties that we experience, especially when it comes to belief, is to take the prayer of the man whose son was healed in the scriptures, where he says, "I believe, Lord, but help my unbelief." But you see, he makes a great point, and so does Thomas. Faith does not preclude doubt. Faith doesn't mean you don't doubt. It just means that in the doubting you trust. Most believers, if they're honest with themselves, would admit that they doubt from time to time what they've learned to be true in religion. And if you're not asking those questions, then you're not taking it seriously enough. Even Mother Teresa wrote about her doubts in her diaries. That's how it is. So friends, which are we? Are we believers who have doubts? Or are we doubters who from time to time sing a hymn and recite a creed? Let me conclude with this experience. So a young girl, she was flying a kite up in the sky. Soon, a low drifting cloud encircled the kite, and it was no longer able to see the kite. So a passerby asked the girl what she was doing holding onto a string in her hand. "Flying the kite," she responded. The passerby, he looked up at the sky and saw only a cloud where there otherwise should be the kite. "I don't see the kite up there. How can you be sure that the kite is up there?" he asked her. She replied, "I don't see it either, but I know the kite is there because every once in a while there's a little tug on the string." Friends, in the same sense, God is guiding us as we proceed along our life of faith. The Lord walks with us. He shows us the way one step at a time. We may not always see him, and in fact we don't, but every once in a while there's a little tug on the string reminding us of his constant presence. As believers, as twins of the doubting Thomas, our job is to hold on to the string until the cloud passes by.